letting everyone know I'm starting the stream.
is next.
Please.
Mr. Edwardson.
Thanks.
Mr. Edwardson.
Thank you. Sergeant, for the purposes of giving evidence, do you still have with you your two statements or interviews and also what's called chronology of events?
Yes, I do.
And I presume quite properly you would have read through all of those documents to prepare yourself to give evidence today?
Yes.
And likewise, did you read through the evidence that you gave at committal?
Yes, I did.
And also the evidence that you gave at trial?
Yes.
Now, before you provided the two interviews or statements, you prepared, I think at the direction of your lawyer, the document described as chronology of events. It's document 7-38.
Yes.
And that's something you yourself typed?
Yes.
And it's a document that you used as an aide-memoire when you came to actually be formally interviewed?
Yes.
And it deals with the events on the 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th of November 2019.
Yes.
Now, I don't want to trawl through the whole history as we had to at trial. There are some certain topics that I need to cover. And I want to deal firstly, if I can, with Kumanjayi Walker. Now, Kumanjayi Walker was a person that was known to you before the so-called axe attack.
Yes, he was.
And you certainly knew, didn't you, that he had an extensive criminal record,
Yes, I did.
comprising of some 66 pages.
I'm not sure how many pages.
In any event, would it be fair to say that in the lead-up to the
Can I
events...
just check that, Mr. Edwardson, I'm really sorry. Is that his antecedent report
Yes.
or his criminal history?
Well, I would call it criminal history.
Right, well there are two different documents that we have.
I'll-
Antecedents have a lot of information which is not criminal history.
Yes, you're
So
right.
that often leads to many more pages than actually reflects the criminal history.
Thank you, Your Honour. Leaving aside the number of pages, certainly you were aware, were you not, of his criminal history?
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that progressively he was becoming a problem in terms of criminal offending?
Yes.
But there's no doubt that the dramatic and significant change, which obviously caused great concern to police, was the axe incident itself.
Yes.
And the axe incident itself was, on any view, a quite terrifying event.
Yes.
And no doubt was terrifying to the two officers who were involved.
Yes.
And indeed it was your understanding of the axe attack that gave rise to you attending at House 577 to speak to Eddie and Lottie, as you've told us.
Yes.
And that was on the evening of the 6th, wasn't it?
Yes.
And when you got there, Rakesha Robertson was there, wasn't she?
Yes, she was.
And you knew by that stage that she had obstructed Officers Hand and Smith in the axe attack.
Yes.
And so you approached her and spoke to her, didn't you?
Yes.
And you told her that she'd be going to court for what she did and that her actions could have got your members killed and also Kumanjayi Walker killed.
Yes, something to that effect, yes.
Well, they're the words that you used in your chronology, aren't they?
Yes.
Which of course accurately reflected the exchange that took place between you and Rakesha that evening.
Yes.
And Eddie, at the time that you first arrived, wasn't there, was he?
No, he wasn't.
And he returned, and he was actually quite angry towards you, wasn't he? Because he was blaming police for what had happened by chasing him.
Yes.
But Lottie intervened, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
And she told Eddie that Kumanjayi Walker had come at Chris and Lanyon with an axe, which made Eddie back off, and he subsequently apologised.
Yes.
You did say, however, didn't you, that you're a community police officer and accordingly you treat community in a fair manner,
Yes.
and that the actions of Kumanjayi Walker were totally unacceptable,
Yes.
and to use deadly weapons against armed members of the police force could have got your members killed, and that Kumanjayi Walker was very lucky that he didn't get killed.
Yes.
And that's how you expressed yourself in that exchange.
Yes.
Because you wanted to make it very clear the seriousness of his position because of what had happened earlier that day.
Yes.
You stressed to them, didn't you, that this did not need to escalate further?
Yes.
And if Kumanjayi Walker was to present himself to the police station within the next 2 hours, you would guarantee that he would be dealt with in a fair manner.
Yes.
So this was an opportunity by you as a community police officer to convey to those who knew Kumanjayi Walker this was a real chance and opportunity for him to resolve this matter peacefully,
Yes.
despite the seriousness of the event that had occurred earlier that day.
Yes.
And you went further though, didn't you? Because you told Rakisha that if she was able to get Kumanjayi Walker to the police station, you would consider not prosecuting her for hindering police.
Yes.
Plainly, she did hinder police, as is self-evident from the video.
Yes.
And you were told, wouldn't you, by Eddie, that he would, if he could, get Kumanjayi Walker to the station.
Yes.
And you then returned to the station to prepare a file for aggravated assault, that being the further charge or charges that would be laid against Kumanjayi Walker upon his arrest.
Yes.
He didn't surrender in the 2 hours that you'd put before him.
No.
And the following morning, you went back to House 577, didn't you?
Yes.
And again, you spoke to Eddie and Lottie.
Yes.
And as soon as you approached, Eddie apologised profusely, didn't he, to you for what had happened the night before. That is the exchange that had taken place.
Yes.
And you then said, look, you raised your voice and apologised again, but you reiterated that the actions of Kumanjayi Walker were totally unacceptable.
Yes.
And he could have severely injured your members.
Yes.
And again, you told them, did you not, that he, that is Kumanjayi Walker, was very lucky that he wasn't shot by your members.
Yes.
Now, by that stage, you knew that there was a funeral.
Yes.
And so you thought it was appropriate to give him yet another chance, that's Kumanjayi Walker, to surrender himself peacefully, hopefully with the assistance of Eddie and Lottie.
Yes.
And so you told them, didn't you, that you would allow him the liberty of not actively chasing him until after the funeral. However, in return, he had to present himself to the police station immediately after the funeral was completed.
Yes.
And that's what you conveyed to Eddie and Lottie.
Yes.
And also to reinforce the seriousness of his position through those two persons, you told them, didn't you, that you'd be seeking resources from Alice Springs?
Yes.
Including the dog and specialist team.
I believe I said about the dog, but I said Alice Springs Police will come.
Well, didn't you say this? I would be seeking resources from Alice Springs, including the dog and specialist team, and they would be taking a zero tolerance approach.
No, I didn't actually say they'd be taking a zero tolerance approach. I said they'll go in harder.
Didn't you say they would be taking a zero tolerance approach?
No,
What did you record in your chronology?
a zero tolerance approach.
Did you record in your chronology the first document that you committed to writing of the events which occurred? Did you not say, I would be seeking resources from Alice Springs, including the dog and specialist team?
No, to Eddie and Lottie, I said Alice Springs Police come and the dog.
Sergeant, can you concentrate on the question, please? In your chronology, and if you need to look at it...
Yeah, I don't think she has it in front of her.
Do you have your chronology with you? I wonder if that could be put up on the screen, if possible, please. I think it's 738 on page 2. Do you have your chronology in front of you?
Yes, I have.
On page 2, you're dealing with the events which occurred on Thursday the 7th of November 2019.
Yes.
And you there recorded, did you not, in the second paragraph, if he did not do this, that is surrender himself, I would be seeking resources from Alice Springs, including the dog and specialist team, and that they would be taking a zero tolerance approach. Is that what you recorded?
That's what I've recorded.
And presumably it accurately reflects what happened. That's what it was for.
That's what it was for, yes.
And it does accurately reflect, does it not, what you said to Eddie and Lottie?
No, I said to Eddie and Lottie, we'll be getting police from Alice Springs and they'll go on a lot harder.
All right. You also discussed with Eddie, did you not, that he would need to text you on the night of the funeral to let you know that Kumanjayi Walker was there?
Yes, that's the arrangement we came to.
And the arrangement was made that he would text Derek and Derek would text you so that you could formulate a plan for arrest.
Yes.
That was all conditional upon another opportunity being extended by you as a community police officer to allow Kumanjayi Walker to peacefully surrender himself.
Yes.
But you knew, didn't you, that Kumanjayi Walker was not going to present himself after the funeral?
I had a very strong feeling that he wasn't, no.
Well, you did record, did you not, in the last sentence of your chronology, I knew that Kumanjayi Walker was not going to present himself after the funeral, so I went into work around 11 a.m. Is that what you recorded in your chronology?
Yes, that's what I recorded.
And that's what happened, isn't it? You went to work around 11 a.m. because you knew that he was not going to present himself after the funeral.
Yeah, that's right.
And so the position, at least at that point in time, that's 11 a.m. in the following morning, is this. You knew that a specialist team was going to be resourced for the purposes of apprehending Kumanjayi Walker.
Yes, at that time, yes.
And you knew that that was necessary because, from your perspective, Kumanjayi Walker was not going to present himself, despite having been given multiple opportunities to do so.
That's correct. I didn't feel that he was going to, no.
By that stage, you knew, didn't you, that the nurses or medical staff from the Yuendamu clinic had left the township?
Yes.
You knew that Kumanjayi Walker was potentially a violent and dangerous offender?
He had escalated in his risk, yes.
Well, your plan, if we call it a plan, the arrest plan, in whatever form it takes in the various email exchanges, you actually describe the event as an arrest of a violent offender, do you not?
Yes.
And that's what he was, and that's what you were planning to do, arrest a violent offender.
Yes.
And it was a potentially high-risk arrest because of the circumstances that had occurred on the 6th of November in the axe attack.
Yes.
And so you were clear in your mind that at least you would try and do the right thing as you did, that is, give him an opportunity with the help of others in the community to surrender. But if that did not eventuate, it would require the services of a specialist team, namely the IRT.
Yes.
And because they have a different skill set from what I'll call run-of-the-mill police officers.
Yes.
They're better equipped to deal with violent offenders.
Yes.
And that's why you specifically requested Superintendent Nobbs to resource that team.
Yes, I wanted the IRT, but I was happy for any resources that came out to me because resourcing was always difficult.
That may be so, but you specifically requested the IRT?
Yes.
And you got that resource, didn't you?
Yes.
And when you made the request, you identified, didn't you, the equipment that they should have?
Constable McCormack told me what equipment they were going to bring out, yes.
Yes, Constable McCormack told you what equipment they would have, but you embraced that equipment, didn't you, and incorporated it into your arrest plan?
Yes, I did.
And indeed we don't need to play it now, but we can see on the CCTV footage that when the members of the IRT arrive at the police station, They are carrying long arms
Yes.
and they're placed, I think, on a table or a desk of some description whilst the briefing or discussions take place with you and others.
Yes.
And we know, don't we, and you knew that they were bringing that equipment because they were specifically identified and specified in your arrest plan.
Yes.
The arrest plan that was emailed to the members of the IRT when they were in transit,
Yes.
and which you say was placed on a table, and I think you identified a document which had that document, or a version of it at least, as we saw in the CCTV footage yesterday.
Sorry, are you talking about the plan?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. So it would appear that whatever was on the desk remained there when they were deployed,
Yes.
and we don't see any of them carrying a piece of paper, do we? With the exception, I think, of the dog handler, Donaldson. He's the exception.
Oh, I can't recall.
I
Now?
don't know that this witness would have gone through everything. You're asking if she
No.
recalls seeing them
Yes.
carrying it, not asking her to provide an opinion on what is shown on the CCTV.
Well, I don't need to take you to the transcript of the trial, but you were specifically directed, were you not, to Mr. Donaldson, the exchange which took place with him? You may not remember. If
yes.
you don't remember it, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I do remember the CCTV footage of me handing it to Constable Donaldson.
In any event, what we do know is that the members of the IRT took their equipment, the equipment that's specified and identified in your arrest plan, with them when they were deployed.
Yes.
And they were deployed by you at 7:05 or thereabouts, weren't they?
Yes.
And you were the officer in charge?
Yes.
And you didn't say anything to them at all about the appropriateness or otherwise of taking those pieces of equipment identified in your arrest plan into the township of Yuendamu.
No, not that I recall.
Now, the basic plan for that night was that the IRT, those members that are identified in your plan, together with the dog handler, were to provide a high visibility policing service in the community,
Yes.
whilst collecting intelligence as to the whereabouts of Kumanjayi Walker.
Well, I think it was Constable Kirstenfeld that mentioned the intelligence, but they were to familiarise themselves with the community.
Well, I'm using your words, am I not? Can I direct your attention to page 3 in the last paragraph of your chronology, the document that
Yes.
you prepared in advance of the interview? Did you not record this? The basic plan for that night, that the arriving teams would provide a high visibility policing service in the community whilst collecting intelligence as to the whereabouts Walker was.
Yes.
And that's true, isn't it?
Yes.
And indeed, it's true also, isn't it, that whilst you knew that the axe incident had occurred in House 577, by that stage, when they were deployed,
Yes.
House 511 was not mentioned specifically or expressly in your arrest plan.
Yes, it was.
Where? Can you show me in the arrest plan?
No, so that was, I wrote 512 and that was what was corrected at the time of the briefing.
My question was, and I'll ask it again, do we see any reference in your plan to House 511?
My apologies, no.
No. And it's true, is it not, that they were, that is the members of the IRT, were told expressly and specifically by you that whilst doing their high visibility policing service in the community and whilst collecting intelligence as to the whereabouts of Kumanjayi Walker, if they did happen to locate him along the way, they were to arrest him?
At the end of the briefing, I believe it was Constable Kirstenfeld said to me, what do you want us to do if we come across him? And I said, by all means, arrest him.
So that was said in the presence of the others?
Yes.
And so they would have understood from you as the investigating officer that when they were deployed at 7:05 p.m, if they came across him whilst intelligence gathering, they were to arrest him.
Yes.
And that's exactly what happened, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
Well, you know.
They weren't meant to be actively searching for him.
Where do we find that in your arrest plan?
We don't. The
No.
arrest plan was clear for a
No.
5:30 arrest.
No. What we do have, though, don't we, is your evidence that you gave at trial on the last occasion and the evidence here. And this is what I suggest. This is page 206 of the cross-examination of trial. I asked you this, did I not? When you prepared your chronology, is this what you said? Quote, the basic plan was for that night that the arriving teams would provide a high visibility policing service in the community whilst collecting intelligence as to the whereabouts of Walker. Answer yes. I asked you that question and you gave that answer, correct?
I can't remember, but it would have, yes.
And that is the position, isn't it? You've just confirmed that from your chronology.
Could I object? Can I ask that my learned friend read the next sentence as well?
Coming
which
to it,
puts that
I'm
in
just dealing with this sentence first.
Terrific.
I'll start again. I asked you, did I not, when you prepared your chronology, is this what you said? Quote, the basic plan was for that night that the arriving teams would provide a high visibility policing service in the community whilst collecting intelligence as to the whereabouts Walker was. Answer yes.
Right.
You agree?
Yes.
And that is, those words are the exact words that you incorporated on that topic into your chronology.
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
You have your chronology in front of you.
Yes.
If you look at your chronology on page 3, the words incorporated into that question reflect accurately, do they not, your record of the basic plan.
The chronology
Could you grapple with the question, please?
Object, she is grappling with the question. And that actual line, can you grapple with the question, is replete throughout her examination in other forums. In this forum, in my respectful submission, she should be allowed to give evidence in a way that is fair and accurate and allows her to tell the story as it was.
And there's no pressure on her to respond quickly to the questions that are being asked.
No, you're right. There is an obligation on the witness, even in this forum, to answer the questions being asked,
Sure,
not something else.
But I'm still looking for the question in the trial transcript. You took me to page 206.
I did.
Third of the way down the page, Your Honour.
Thank you.
Now, I'll start again, if I may, Sergeant. The words, the basic plan was for that night that the arriving teams would provide a high visibility policing service in the community whilst collecting intelligence as to the whereabouts Walker was. They are your words from your chronology, are they not?
I believe so.
Well, you've got the chronology in front of you. You can see it, can't you?
Do you want me to read the whole thing so I can refresh my memory on it?
Just have a look at the third page, the very last paragraph, the first sentence.
Yes.
Thank you. And you were then asked if they did happen to locate him along the way, they were to arrest him, otherwise the plan was to wait. Answer yes. I asked you that question and you gave that answer at trial.
I think at trial I clarified what I actually, how that answer came to be.
She doesn't have the trial transcript in front of her, and given the number of questions that were asked at trial, it's not reasonable to expect her to remember that.
I'll put it another way, Your Honour. Sergeant, do you agree that Kirsten Felt, in the presence of others, were told that if they, that is the members of the IRT, did happen to locate him along the way, they were to arrest him?
Yes, Kirstenfeld asked me, what do you want us to do if we come across him? And I said, by all means, arrest him.
Otherwise, the plan was to wait.
Definitely.
Yes, because in a perfect world, as is set out in your, what I'll call your arrest plan, you hoped that they would be able to identify where he was and arrest him while he was asleep at 5:30 in the morning?
We knew that at 5:30 in the morning, Kumanjayi Walker, we knew where he would be sleeping.
Where is it not the case, and was it not your sworn testimony, that you didn't know where he was at the time that these men were deployed?
When the men were deployed, I think it stands to reason that I wouldn't know where anyone was at any given time. However, like I've explained, at 5:30 in the morning, I know that he would have been at 577.
Do we have that anywhere in your plan?
577 was in my plan, yes, and it's marked primary residence. I believe it was primary or
Yes.
principal.
No. Do we have anywhere in your plan the notion that he would be in that house at 5:30 a.m. the following morning?
No, but that's what was told.
Why, if he was going to be there at 5:30 in the morning, would you deploy the IRT to intelligence gather as to his whereabouts?
Intelligence gathering could mean a lot of different things, but it doesn't mean actively searching for him. If I wanted to use the element of surprise in an arrest, the last thing you would do would be to attend 577.
All right. In any event, you've accurately recorded, as you've told us, the basic plan as set out in your chronology and confirmed in evidence today.
The chronology was very rough.
Are you suggesting that it's inaccurate?
I'm suggesting that it wasn't word perfect. It was more of a chronology of times and dates and when things had taken place.
But
It was more for an aid memoir. It wasn't specific or word perfect.
what I'm suggesting to you is that this is the first document that you recorded the critical events for the 6th to the 9th, true?
Yes, but it was only to assist me to get my mind straight when it came time to make my statement.
And it could only assist you to get your mind straight if it accurately reflected the events as they unfolded on all of those days.
I didn't actually refer to it in my when I actually gave my statement in the end. It was just a process that enabled me to get the version of events in my head correctly for the purpose of giving my statement.
I want to ask you a little bit, if I can, about first of all, your nursing experience. You've told us that you've been a nurse before a police officer quite some years.
Yes.
And because you were a nurse, you obviously had some skill set, and you were able to, consistent with your evidence, see the way in which the members of the IRT were seeking to medically assist Kumanjayi Walker after the shooting.
Yes.
And just bear with me. And page 736 of the transcript, Your Honour.
Trial transcript.
In this hearing. Your
Oh,
Honour.
thank you.
Page 736, I just remind you of what you said in answer to questions by Dr. Dwyer. Excuse me, Ron. My apologies, 730. At page 730, you were asked this question. I'm not going to show you it because it's distressing, referring to the video footage. But in the brief of evidence, Her Honour has the CCTV footage and body-worn video footage that shows members of the IRT performing first aid on Kumanjayi after he was taken into the station. Did you assist in that at all? And your answer was no, a very small part of it. I knew the members that were performing CPR were military, had a military background, and I knew what they were doing a fantastic job, as good as you could do with the equipment we had. So I knew the medical side of things were being covered, and they had 4 members to rotate the medical side of things, and that allowed me to continue planning resources, ensuring the safety of my members and all members. Compound making sure that the town wasn't and we couldn't catch the word, that type of stuff. Do you remember giving that evidence?
Yes.
So you had the advantage, didn't you, because of your past experience in nursing, of being satisfied that they were doing anything and everything they could possibly do to medically assist Kumanjayi Walker.
They did a brilliant job. They did very, very well.
And the one person that was primarily involved, it was a collective thing, of course, was indeed Constable Zachary Rolfe.
Yes, he was principally providing first aid.
Thank you. Now, the tragedy of this, amongst many things, was that, of course, there was no medical assistance because the nurses had left.
Yes.
And you simply didn't have the wherewithal, the equipment and the like to attend to the very dire position that he was in.
No.
No. You knew when you deployed the IRT that there was no medical staff in the township.
Yes.
You knew that Kumanjayi Walker, as you've told us, was a violent offender.
Yes.
You knew that 2 days before he had deployed an axe against 2 police officers, one of whom is your partner.
Yes.
So you therefore knew that he was a real risk of doing the same thing again if confronted by police.
Yes.
And you also knew from your vast experience that when people deploy weapons, as he did, there is or can be a potential for a violent conflict.
Yes.
And if somebody does deploy a weapon, as he did with an axe, and as you told Lottie and Eddie, he was lucky he didn't get shot on that occasion.
Yes.
So if you know all of those things, did it occur to you that there was always the potential for a violent conflict at the time of arrest?
No, that's why it was imperative that a 5:30 arrest be made, because it would get the element of surprise where we don't give him the opportunity to react. He would be
I understand that in an ideal world, that's what you hoped would happen. But as you have told us, not just in this inquiry, but at committal and at trial, they were to intelligence gather as to his whereabouts. I don't want to go over all this again, but that's what you told us, correct?
Yes.
And if they came across him, they were to arrest him.
Yes, so like I said, when Constable Kirstenfeld asked me, what do you want us to do if we come across him?
Yes.
And I said, by all means, arrest him.
So it must have occurred to you that it was at least on the cards, or a real possibility, that they may come across him shortly after leaving the Uwindamu police station, deployed by you at 7:05 or thereabouts.
I didn't think there was any possibility that they would come across him.
I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing for all of us. We can all reflect and see how things unravelled in a way that you didn't predict. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
I want to ask you a little bit about the community and the perceived threat that you had in very difficult circumstances after the shooting. As I understand your evidence from yesterday, you felt that there was a very real threat from the community to your members inside the police station.
Yes.
It was real, and certainly real to you.
Yes.
You've mentioned that there were rocks being thrown on the roof.
Yes.
You were concerned that they were going to storm the police station.
Yes.
You were concerned that the occupants, that is the police officers themselves, could be at serious risk.
Yes, and the community, yes.
Yes. And you knew that there was a high probability that members of the community were armed or had armed themselves for that purpose.
Yes.
Now, one thing that seems, as I understand your evidence, to have in large measure assisted you particularly was Derek and Warren Williams.
Yes.
And their communications between you on the one hand and hence the other members inside and, of course, the community outside.
Yes.
Now, please correct me if I've got your evidence wrong, but I think your evidence yesterday was that it was actually Derek Williams that told you to lock the door and stay inside.
Derek had told Constable Alafeo that.
So he told Constable Alafeo that the doors should be locked and that the police should stay inside.
Yes.
That was for their own self-protection.
Yes.
Now, I want to ask you, I'm now referring to page 371 of the trial evidence. Mr. Felix Alfeo gave evidence at trial, and I just want to read some passages to you and see whether you agree.
Well, I don't know, just give us a moment to get those passengers up ourselves.
So it was just page 371 of the trial transcript?
Yes, thank you. On to 372. I don't know, to be honest. It's the trial transcript. It's page 371 to 372.
That's 19-26.
I'm just going to read this transcript or portion of the transcript to you, if I can, please. And these were questions asked of Felix Alfeo. You were basically helping at the Yuendamu police station. Answer, that's correct. You never went out into the community with any of those members, did you? Answer, that's correct. Nor did Constable Hand. That's correct. Constable Smith. That's correct. Sergeant Frost. That's correct. Now, that's all true self-evidence, consistent with your evidence, isn't it? Yes?
Constable Smith wasn't in the police station at the time.
Yes, that's right. But he never went into the community. He wasn't there. I understand that. None of those officers went with the IRT.
No.
No. In fact, no one from the Yuendamu police station, the question goes on, went out into the community to assist the 4 members of the IRT and the dog handler. Answer, that's correct. You agree with that?
Yes.
All right. You saw the body-worn video, so you had an idea, and you've obviously said you were shocked, very surprised when you saw what you saw. Would you agree that that's a very confronting piece of footage? Answer, I agree with that. That's the axe incident. And you would agree with that too, wouldn't you? It is a very confronting piece of footage.
Yes.
Question, it was certainly a massive escalation from the way that you had dealt with him on earlier occasions. Answer, that's correct. You'd agree with that too, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Question, and that's why it was regarded as being so dangerous and so serious. Answer, that's correct. You'd agree with that too?
Yeah, yes.
Indeed, that's why the IRT were deployed. Answer, I believe so.
Yes.
And you've given evidence on all fours with that, haven't you?
Yes.
Question, and they were deployed, we know, at 7:05 p.m. that evening on 9 November. Answer, that's correct.
What?
Now, of course, your plan contemplated deployment at about 11 p.m, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
But you deployed them, as it happens, at 7:05 p.m.
Yes.
I'll continue on the transcript. It's true also, and again, I don't expect you to remember much of the fine detail, but would you agree with this much? It was obvious from all of the people who were involved in that discussion or briefing, call it what you will, that at that point in time, just before they were deployed, they did not know where Kumanjayi Walker was. Answer, that's correct.
Yes.
Question, what they did know, however, was that the last known place that he'd been seen by police was where the axe incident occurred, and that occurred 3 days before, on the 6th of November 2019. Answer, that's correct. You agree with that too?
Yes.
At house 577, he said, I believe so. You agree with that too?
Yes.
All right, I said. Now, you were specifically told, were you not, by Sergeant Frost that neither you, Smith or Hand were to assist. You were to stay at the police station. Answer, that's correct. You agree with that too?
At that time, yes.
In other words, you were never told you were to go out into the community with the IRT to assist in the arrest. Answer, that's correct.
I can't answer for Felix, but that's incorrect if that's what he said.
You were told that you were to remain at the Windamoo police station and assist once he'd been arrested. He said that's correct, but during part of the briefing, that for if Mr. Walker's to be arrested the next morning at 5 or 5:30 in the morning, she wanted me to accompany them.
I can't answer what Constable Felix, Constable Alfeo has said in his evidence, but that wasn't the plan.
That was the plan. What I'm suggesting,
That wasn't the plan.
what I'm saying is that he's correct, isn't he? That you did tell him that he was to remain at the Windamoo police station and to assist once he'd been arrested. However, if he was to be arrested the next morning at 5 or 5:30, he was to accompany the IRT for that purpose.
I object that it is misleading if it's suggested that Constable Alfeo did not know of the plan to meet at 5 o'clock the next morning for the purposes of an arrest at 5:30, because Constable Alfeo's evidence in this court and others is that he knew of that arrest plan.
What is being put, I think, is that there was also an arrest plan of some sort when the IRT were sent out on the evening before the morning arrest.
Then in my respectful submission, that should be put fairly and squarely, and then that can be answered.
I'll put a question to you this way, if I may, please, Sergeant. And I think we're actually, you and I at least, are on all fours in this sense. Certainly, Felix Alfeo, as were the other members of the IRT, they were told, were they not, that if Kumanjayi Walker was arrested the next morning at 5 or 5:30 a.m, you wanted Alex to be with the IRT when that happened.
No, that's incorrect.
All right. I then asked, but I'm talking firstly about when they went out. You were told specifically that you were not to join them when they departed at 7:05 p.m. Answer, that's correct. Do you agree?
And no, I never asked or demanded specifically whether he could or couldn't. It never came up.
Right. You certainly said that Hand and Smith would not be going out with the IRT members because of the potential conflict problem.
No, I didn't. Constable Smith wasn't even there.
I understand that, but the same applied to both of them, didn't it? You didn't want them to have anything to do with the arrest because of the potential conflict problem.
With Constable Hand, that's correct.
All right. So you were told, so all you were told, the question goes on, was that if the arrest happened to occur the following morning, that on that occasion you might come on that shift at 5 o'clock and you might go out and help them. Answer, that's correct. Do you agree with that?
No.
Okay. And by the time they were deployed at 7:05 p.m, what you did know, and what the other members knew from what they'd been told, was that House 577 was the last known place he'd been seen at.
Yes.
And the police did not know when they left at that time exactly where he was?
No one would have had any clue where he was at that time.
And so it was against that background, as you've told us, that they were to conduct intelligence gathering exercises to try and identify where he was within the community.
No.
We've had some evidence from officers, and in particular Sergeant Jolly, who I think is your successor as the officer in charge of the Windamoo Police Station.
Yes.
And without going into specific detail, she's given some very helpful evidence about the way in which police officers deal with elders within the community. And certainly you've touched on that as well, I think, haven't you?
I can't remember, sorry.
Well, if you haven't done expressly, I'll just ask you some questions if I may. Certainly
Sure.
from your experience in the lead up to this tragic event, this shooting, you'd had a lot to do with the community, hadn't you?
Yes.
And there is a different way of policing, generally speaking, between what we call town police officers and, if you like, community-based police officers.
Yes.
And one of the ways in which there is a difference, as you have described, is that you or other police officers would go into the community, speak with elders, and try and get their assistance to bring about a peaceful outcome.
Where appropriate, and depends on the target.
Of course. And that's the point, isn't it? It's where appropriate and it depends on the target.
Yes.
In this particular case, the target, as you described him, that is Kumanjayi Walker, was, of course, we all acknowledge, I think now, he was a high-risk offender.
He had escalated in his risk.
So much so that you sought the resources of the IRT, as you told us.
Yes.
And he was properly described by you in your plan and various emails as a violent offender.
That's what I've described him in my, yes.
Despite all of that, you tried your best, can I suggest, to engage members of the community that knew him in the hope that you could resolve this matter peacefully.
Yes.
Without further conflict.
Yes.
And certainly without him deploying another weapon, another potentially fatal weapon, such as scissors, as we now know.
Yes.
You wanted to avoid, if at all possible, a repetition of what had happened on the 6th of November.
Definitely.
And so what you did was you engaged, as you've told us, and I'm not going to go over it all again, but you engaged with Eddie and Lottie in the hope that they might bring about his surrender.
Yes.
And you gave him, through your discussions with them, multiple opportunities for that to happen.
2, yes.
Yeah, they've got the 2 hours, then you go back the following day, and then you said, look, my words, not yours, effectively cut him some slack, we'll let him go to the funeral, but as soon as the funeral is completed, he must surrender himself.
Yes.
And importantly and appropriately, in trying to impress upon Eddie and Lottie, as you did, the seriousness of Kumanjayi Walker's position, you told them that things are escalating, and that's why he must surrender.
Yes.
And because what he did was very serious indeed.
Yes.
And importantly, you even went so far as to tell those 2 members of the community that it was your intention, absent his surrender, to deploy a specialist team.
I think I said the Alice Springs Police.
Well, in your...
She does use that, but she's qualified that a number of times now.
She might have, Your Honour.
She's mentioned the Alice Springs Police.
Yes.
And she mentioned the dog.
Yes.
And she didn't mention some of the other language that she's used in that document.
It doesn't detract, of course, Your Honour, from the fact that that's the first record that she made of the events.
But she's clarified that that's not exactly the language that she used. She prepared a document to assist her to recall the events as best she could.
Mm-hmm.
And having reflected on that document, she is now being clear that the language that is used in that document is not necessarily precisely the words that we used with the family.
Yes, Your Honour, accurately reflects the evidence that she's now given.
Yeah.
Sergeant, can I ask you this? If you didn't tell Lottie and Eddie, or use the word specialist team or IRT, you certainly intended to convey to them that there was going to be an escalation in police response. If
Sorry,
you
can you
surrender.
just repeat?
All right.
So you just repeat that?
Even if you didn't use the word specialist team or IRT, you certainly intended and did convey to them that if he didn't surrender, there was going to be an escalation in police response.
I don't know. I've never said there's going to be an escalation. I said we will get the Alice Springs police out and they will go in harder than we would.
Well, going harder is an escalation, isn't it?
Yes, and I didn't say that because I expected the Alice Springs police to go in harder. It was my way of pleading with Eddie and Lottie. This is serious. Please bring him in.
What you were doing, though, obviously, was explaining to Eddie and Lottie the difference between a community response, community police response, as opposed to a town police response.
I was pleading. Then this is serious. Please bring him in.
Yeah. And all I'm simply putting to you is that you did everything you could possibly do to try and get a message to Kumanjayi Walker to put his hands up and surrender.
Yes.
In other words, don't ever do what you did on the 6th of November, take an axe to police officers, because the response might be fatal.
Sorry, say that again.
What you were telling them, because you said, didn't you, in your words, he could have been shot when he did the axe incident, correct?
That's what I told them, yes.
Yeah, and all I'm saying to you, all I'm simply saying is you were making it very clear that if he behaved like that again, it could have fatal consequences. You wanted to make it really clear that people cannot deploy weapons against police.
Yes.
Thank you. When you told us that, I can't remember the exact words that you used, but you certainly weren't flattering about the way in which Officer Kirstenfeld spoke to you.
Challenging.
Right.
In other words, you didn't like the way in which he spoke to you.
No.
No. That was him, the way he presented to you and how you felt inappropriately he spoke to you.
Yes.
That's certainly not what happened in the case of Zachary Rolfe, though, is it?
Constable Rolfe didn't say a thing. Other than hello, he didn't say a thing in the entire time.
Right.
And I actually believed he was listening to what I was saying.
Right. So you believe that Zachary Rolfe was being attentive to what you were saying?
Yes.
And your evidence, as you can now recall it, is that apart from saying hello, he didn't say anything else to you at all?
No.
No. That's your best recollection, is it?
Yes.
Right. So there was certainly nothing about his manner, demeanour, conversation, or anything of that nature that you thought was inappropriate?
No.
And indeed, when you next see him after he's deployed at 7:05 p.m. by you, it's after the shooting?
Yes.
And you've already told us the efforts that he and the others were making to try and attend to Kumanjayi Walker.
Yes.
Your Honour, do you mind if we have a very short break? I don't think I've got much more. I just want to have a quick word with my instructor, if I may.
Sure. Do you want me to take the afternoon
Oh, that's right,
break
Rebecca,
now?
if you wouldn't mind.
So 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Wilson, Coronial,